Scaling images in InDesign can be a little tricky, especially if you're new to working with InDesign and you're placing images in and you're wondering what's happening when you're scaling it and the frame is scaling but the image isn't. And if you're wondering what I'm talking about when I'm talking about frame and image, that will be explained. So first we want to get an image in here to work with. The best thing to do is Command D. And that is a great key command to know with InDesign because it's going to open up what is the place function. And that would be in the File menu, File, Place. Command D, when you're working with InDesign, you're always working with images, so it's one of the best key commands to use and just use regularly. Shouldn't have to even go to the File menu when you're placing images. So I'm going to go to the image I want to place. I know that it's a very high-res image, so we'll see what happens when I open it. And I'm going to place this just up in the corner of my bleed. When I click place, we'll see that is a really large image. And that immediately causes some difficulty in working with it because we can't see the entire image. We can't see the entire frame that it's placed in. The other thing is, if you see your image come in and it looks a little low, looks a little fuzzy, remember that you can go to the View menu and down to your Display Performance. What it may have done is come in by default at Typical Display. And you'll see mine change just a bit there. I'll go back to View, Display Performance, and High Quality. Now, I have to remember when we place images into InDesign, initially they're linked in. So it's just showing a preview of that image. So it's going to default likely to a low resolution preview just to keep the program moving a little faster. But in this case, we can move it up to the high res, or what we call high quality display. And that's going to look a little cleaner. So what I want to do here is scale this down. I'm going to zoom out. In this case, I'm going to press Space, Command, Option, and I'll click out. If you're on a PC, that would, of course, would be Space, Control, Alt. And I want to get it to where I can see the entire frame. When I say frame, what we're seeing right now here, this blue bounding box, is the frame that that image is in. If I hover over here, I'll click off and then I'll hover over again. We may see the circle. There we go. We just get a little hint. I don't even see the circle because of where it's landing, but you can see the hand. That's going to allow me to click on the image in the frame. That now we see an orange box, and that was indicating the actual image that's in the frame. There's that circle. So we can also go to the direct select cursor. I'll click off. You can click on that. And what I've done is just move the image in that frame. And I know it can be a little confusing when you're seeing this because you think it's a single object, but you have to remember in InDesign, a placed image is an object that is in a frame. I'll just undo that, Command Z. I'll click off, go to my direct select cursor here, and I'm going to click the image, subsequently clicking the frame, and I'm going to scale this down. Now, if I just hold Shift, always hold Shift in InDesign when you're scaling, and I scale it down. I want to get it into the page space. What I've done there is scaled only the frame. You can see the image is still the same as it was. And I'm going to do Command 0 here to show the page. I'm going to do Command : to turn those guides off. Now, this is more helpful because the frame is on the page, but the full image isn't in the frame. So in this case, I can go to Object, Fitting, and Fit Content to Frame. Because I scaled the frame using the Shift key and did it proportionately, it's going to fit the content proportionately. That's very helpful. But there's an even better way to do this. I'm not going to zoom out again or undo what I did, but if I wanted to scale that more efficiently, save myself a couple of steps, I can actually scale that frame holding Command Shift in that order. So Command Shift, click and drag, and I'll scale both the frame and the image together. That's so helpful. It saves that extra step of scaling one and having to fit to the other. even if you wanted, you could scale the image, and I just clicked in there. I clicked that little circle. Now I've got the orange box indicating the image. I'll scale that up, and now I can click on my object menu and go to fitting and fit content to frame. I can do it both ways, or sorry, I was going to do there, fit frame to content, or content to frame, frame to content. There we go. So content to frame. Oh, that's what I had done. All right, so got to remember what I'm working on here. So I'll go to fitting and frame to content. There we go. Let's see what it did. There we go. So either way, you're using the fitting menu, but you shouldn't have to. You should be scaling using Command Shift, click and drag. So it can be a little confusing when you're using the fitting, especially like me, when you never use those, because I always just use scale by Command Shift, click and drag. And when I say the order, when you press Command, then Shift, then click and drag while you're holding Command and Shift down, that order is important. If you do it in the wrong order, sometimes you're going to mess up, or you're going to not get both. So what you're doing is Command is what's including both, and Shift is maintaining those proportions. Okay, so Command Shift, click and drag. Now what's happening when we're scaling like that, let me just turn my grids and guides on here. I'm going to scale it down to be within the content of those columns. Remember, when you're working with grids and guides like this, you want to land, really, if you can, inside the column space. So what's happening when we scale both, they're remaining fixed to frame and content. They're the same size. But I can use the frame to scale down, and I can hide some of that image. I'm not holding any keys here. I'm just grabbing the frame, the handle there, and I'm closing that image down, remembering that I'm going into the content area of the rows and columns, and I'm not landing in a gutter. And if I was landing in the gutter, it would look like this. Well, I don't want to do that, because that gutter is a space. I have to look at that gutter as space for something that might come beside it. So I'm just going to get those landing there. Now, what that does is it means there's excess image. We can see this. That's hidden. On a file, on a PDF that's exported, that's going to be extra space. In a production file for print, that's extra. That's something we don't need, we don't want. It's making our file bigger. So we have a way of getting rid of that. Now, a couple things that we can do. Once we've got this placed, right now this is what we call for position only. I've got it placed. I may move it around, I may make adjustments and find a better view for that image in that space. But this is for position only. And we call it for position only, or FPO, if we're going to go into Photoshop and crop it to size. And what crop to size means is essentially we've got this very large image right now, large in terms of resolution, that we've scaled down. So we've kind of taken a very large, very high resolution image, and we've brought it down to, like maybe a fifth or a sixth of its original size. And that is taking a lot of resolution and compressing it down into a smaller space. And we remember that 300 dpi is the standard print resolution. So you want to be careful. You don't just want to export this, because in print, it's taking a whole lot of resolution into a smaller space, and that can affect the quality of the printing. Higher resolution does not mean better printing when it goes above the standard resolution of the printers itself, which is still 300 dpi being the ideal resolution. So we could open this image in Photoshop, understanding that we need it cropped to this area of the image, and go over into Photoshop with the size that it has. So if we go to our properties panel, let me just see if I've got mine open here. So I know that I would need to crop this down to 6.4583 by 5.2708. I would open that in Photoshop and crop it to size at 300 pixels per inch. You can check out one of my crop to size tutorials. I should probably make a new one of this image just to be helpful. However, we have a little bit of a saving grace for that in InDesign. So we know, again, we've got that excess image. It's very high resolution. It's too high for quality print. So when we export, I'll go to File and Export. If I'm exporting this PDF, I've got it set to PDF to Adobe PDF for print. I'll save. And in here, in general, I don't need to change anything. I've got View PDF after exporting, all that. I'll go to Compression, and this is where it's very helpful. So if I have an image that exceeds 300 ppi, pixels per inch, I can set it to be downsampled to 300 pixels per inch. So if this image is 1500, at the size that it's going to be in that PDF, it's going to downsample that to 300. And it's going to do it for grayscale images as well. The other thing, this is important, is to select crop image data to frames. What that means is that that excess that we saw that we're not seeing, the hidden part of the image, is going to be removed. What that does is remove unnecessary data from that PDF file, from that production file, and subsequently removes extraneous information, makes it a smaller size. So that is a great thing. These help. These are kind of saving us from making a production file that's going to be saturated in its resolution and subsequently in how much ink is put at it by the printer. Now, one thing to be aware of is this is superficial, meaning we're not actually changing the image itself. This is just changing some coding really in the file to trick it, but it's not changing the true image. That's why it's ideal to go into Photoshop, crop to size. Once we know this is the size we want our image and where we want it and how we want it to look, go into Photoshop, crop it to this exact size and this amount showing, and set that to 300 ppi in Photoshop so that we don't have to worry about this having to be done to the image. Then we know it's truly been corrected in its resolution at the image, and it's not relying on superficial correction in the export of the file.